brick, brick, and more brick. Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to have a quick look at turning plastic brick sheet, something like this, into a finished product that hopefully will look something like that. So I think most people, when building buildings for their model railroad, are going to have at least one or two buildings that are going to end up being brick. And I know for myself, it was really daunting. Really definitely throughout my teens and even into my 20s, I avoided any building that I'd have to paint. I was always really afraid of wrecking it. So I thought I'd do this and just kind of show my technique. Even still, when it comes to doing the final coats, I tend to get a little nervous, but it always turns out better than I expected it would. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what the brick and the mortar is. And I'll just show some stock photos here. So in my mind, quite often, the grout is always going to be a gray color or like a concrete color. But in reality is you can have light brick with dark grout, light brick with light grout, red brick with red grout, red brick with dark grout. So there's all kinds of different color combinations depending on the design and what the architect actually wanted for the building. For a lot of the buildings, I do just kind of go for the basic gray grout. It generally fits the aesthetic I'm looking for. So having a look here, this building started out, the plastic sheets were all gray like that. I started out by giving a base coat. I actually masked. So I masked the parts that were to stay concrete and then painted the brick areas this red color. In this particular case, I ended up using a Tamiya lacquer. Actually turned out that it was by accident because I ended up grabbing a lacquer instead of an acrylic because the hobby shop, which is 3 hours away, was about to close. Turned out well anyway. I used some of my precious supply of Flowquill concrete for the concrete part. So yeah, I masked the concrete areas, painted the brick, and then went back, masked the brick, painted the concrete, and then I do a wash over top, which turns this very, very vibrant red into this more muted red with some mortar detail. And for that wash, I have used Woodland Scenics Earth colors. They're concrete. This is an acrylic, or water soluble at the very least. So it kind of works very well as a wash. It's also kind of nice because if you do end up going a little heavy or whatever, you can take some water and just kind of wash it off. You probably won't get it all, but you can definitely knock it back quite a bit if you need to. So if anybody's interested, this is the kit that I'm working on here. I may go back and do a separate kind of review on this. But this is just specifically about kind of how I do my brick detailing. So let me show you how I do it. To do this, found that a bunch of different ways you can do it, but one of the easiest I found is to just try to put it on with a brush first. Try to get it down in the grout lines as much as you can. Biggest trick seems to be, especially after just shaking it up like I did, you can get little air bubbles which hang in the grout lines. nice heavy coat. As I said, I always found this kind of hard when you're starting. You just spend all this time masking and painting. Looks pretty good, and then you're going to take this and you're going to smear it all over your lovely paint job, but the results are hard to argue with, so it's worth the risk. So I'll usually let that set up for just a second or a minute or two. I'll go on and I'll do another section. Okay, so now once we've let this sit for just a minute, quite often just start by taking a bunch of it off with my finger. What I found is if you use something a little too absorbent like paper towel, it'll actually take it right out of the grout lines. Once I've got kind of started, I tend to use just a Q-tip. Go back and just kind of wipe along with the brick pattern. You can already see compared to the one next to it, we're starting to kind of get that grout in the brick look. And even any residue that's left on it tends to kind of give it that kind of dusty red brick look, which especially for an old factory like this tends to work very well. So now generally at about this point, I will let it dry a little bit more. You will notice that the brick, at least with this particular method, does tend to get a little dusty looking as the pigment starts to dry. You can go back again later, just dampen a Q-tip, and just gently rub on top again, and get a little bit more of the paint off if you need to. It's very much kind of getting it to suit. The only problem I found with this method is you go through a lot of Q-tips. If you do notice any spots where there have been a few bubbles or anything like that, you can just go back in. Just put a little bit more pigment on. Little variation though adds to the realism, because you will notice that on most buildings there will be places where the mortar is a bit more apparent than other places. So that's one of the other nice things about this, is that the airbrush gives us a very nice kind of uniform look. When you go back with the wash for the mortar, it kind of adds a little variety and a little variation to the brick, which does tend to make it look a lot more natural, weathered, a little less like a, although well painted, still like a toy, to actually looking like some real brick. So there we go. You can see this side started to dry a little bit more. It's gotten a little hazy, so we can just dampen the Q-tip a little bit. Don't want it dripping wet, because otherwise you can't actually remove the mortar from inside the grout lines. And then you're going to have to start over again. It's just lightly damp, just light passes over top. You're just trying to clean the faces of those bricks a little bit, get some of the pigment off. There we have it. Couple more sections. It is a bit of a slow process, but the results are pretty good by my estimation. This is just about the best method I found so far to do grout lines. There's a lot of other methods out there. I'd love to hear the methods that you use. Feel free to drop a comment down below. You can see this side set up a little bit, or actually quite a bit. It's been a few days. It's kind of evened out. It's got that bit of a dusty look. Once again, you can just go back afterwards if you need to, clean it up a little bit more. But that is a result that I'm pretty happy with and will be happy to put on my layout. The other thing I do sometimes anyway, I might not in this case, is you can hit it with some dull coat or some kind of a matte varnish. Which just kind of, it does knock the white down a little bit more, darkens up the grout line. So if it's a little bit much for you, that can be an option to mute it a little bit. I do have some touch up and stuff I still need to do on the concrete before this is completely finished, but we will save that for a different video. Hopefully you found that video at least a little informative. If you did, please hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. You can follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And you can also check out my webpage at tinkeringgeek.com. And until next time, keep tinkering.